All right, group. Now we're going to move on to talking about OSHA, which stands for Occupational Safety and Health Administration. So if you've heard of OSHA, this might be a little bit redundant, but if you haven't, then this is going to be some good information for you that is good to know once you go out into the workforce because it will likely affect you. Depending on what you go into. So our key point today is OSHA enforces safe and healthful working conditions in order to protect employees from workplace hazards and injuries. So basically, let's dive into it. OSHA is an organization that works to keep employees safe, really. It works to make sure that employers are not taking advantage of their employees and ensuring that they have safe working conditions. So it is a government agency, and it's part of the United States Department of Labor. So it works to ensure safety and healthful working conditions, like we stated, with men and women by setting and enforcing standards and providing training, outreach, education, and assistance. And they do this in a lot of different sectors. I mean, there is OSHA, like we talked, for vet clinics, but there's also OSHA standards for working on a construction site, which is probably where you might hear of it most often. But it's everywhere, really. I mean, it's at greenhouses, and it's any place that you're going to be doing something that's unsafe, and that works with chemicals, but it also works with hands-on things. So let's dive into it a little bit more, huh? Why doesn't it go to the next thing? Okay. All right. OSHA was initiated by the Occupational Safety and Health Act in 1970 under President Richard Nixon. So it hasn't been around for that long if you really think about it. Fatalities have dropped from 38 injuries per day in 1971 to 12 per day in 2016, and that's quite a significant drop. So, and then we're talking about fatal injuries. So that's people dying on the workplace because there are not proper procedures in place for them to live or work in a safe environment. All right, so these fatalities could include crushing, falling, electrocution, insect stings, being hit or thrown from equipment. This is just something I thought was kind of funny, and you might see this. You might see this on your Facebooks or your Instagrams. OSHA approved is just the funny memes that go with it. Obviously, this is probably not a great way to safely work on this light. This one, standing on the door, that takes skill. Hopefully there's someone holding the door down there, but I don't know about that. And then this one I thought was funny because not a lot of times we don't like to wear our safety glasses, but you quickly realize when something happens to you that you're glad that you have it. So the moment you realize OSHA isn't so bad. All right, so let's talk about NIOSH. The National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health is the federal agency responsible for conducting research and making recommendations for the prevention of work-related injuries. It's located in the CDC, Center for Disease Control and Prevention. NIOSH is not a legal enforcement agency, whereas OSHA is a legal enforcement agency. So when we talk that they're a federal agency, that basically means that they're part of the government, right? Because when we talk about federal, that kind of means, so like if I have my federal income tax, that's coming from the United States government. That's not coming, and then I have like my state income tax that obviously comes from the state. So there's difference there, and we have our federal government and our state governments. So that's a little more explanation on that. But NIOSH works with OSHA to make recommendations. So they just come from different entities, and then they have some different ways that they can enforce. Like it says here, like NIOSH cannot actually do things. They can just conduct the research and give the recommendations, but OSHA is the one that can enforce them. All right, so for protection, most private sector employers and their workers are covered by OSHA. OSHA helps by educating employees about toxic chemicals, deadly safety hazards, job hazards at high-risk jobs, and then the best practices through this compliance system. So let's talk about what's covered under OSHA. So most private sector employers and then the federal government workers. Who is not covered? This is going to be your immediate family members or farm employees. Self-employed employed individuals, people with workplace hazards that are regulated by other agencies, and as stated, it says that it includes mine safety and health administration to the Coast Guard. So they're going to have their different set of rules that they have to follow because they have such a different environment of a workplace. So basically, if you go out to your grandpa's farm or something, they're not covered by OSHA. They don't have to follow OSHA regulations, but it's a good guideline to follow and to kind of understand so that you are creating the most safe environment that you can. So workers have the rights to these things, the right to a safe workplace, and when we're talking about working like a vet clinic and for working about in a vet hospital, you have the right to be around safe chemicals, and you have the right to have the proper PPE or personal protective equipment to feel safe. And especially during this time now that we're living in, you want to be able to have the proper PPE. If you require a mask or maybe like a face shield, that's something that would be regulated under OSHA as well, because you're required to have a safe workplace. So then some other things that are included, that the right to raise safety or health concerns to your employer without having any ramifications, your right to request OSHA inspection of the workplace. So at any time you can contact an OSHA worker and they will come through and they will basically be a safety manager, and they'll come through and point out you have risks here, here, and here, and you need to fix these by this date. And then that's how you can create a safer working environment. And then it kind of goes with two, you need the right to participate or have a representative participate in OSHA inspection, what we just talked about, and then the right to file a complaint with OSHA kind of goes with that as well. All right, workers also have the right to see an OSHA citation issued to the employer. So if the safety manager comes through and they make their list of things that needed to be changed, you as the employee have a right to see that list and to know what areas that you're working in that are unsafe, and then request copies of their own medical records or tests to measure the hazards in the workplace and injury and illness logs. This doesn't go as much with the vet clinic, but if you're working in, say, a chemical factory and you end up having cancer, you might be able to get hazard pay or get some sort of compensation for that if you can relate it back to it. All right, so let's talk about the employer responsibilities. So there are a lot of these, so we'll try to go through them quite quickly. So we want to provide working with the workplace free of recognized hazards following the OSHA safety and health standards. You want to be finding and correcting safety and health problems along the way, and then try to eliminate those risks for your employees. So there are things that you can do, and this is something that you could definitely have your want in the vet hospital's ventilation systems. If I come through and I am using chemicals to wipe down the surfaces like we talked about in the last video, then you want to be able to have that ventilation go through so that it doesn't fill up the air, and then you have respiratory issues from that. So those are just some of the things that you would need to do as the employer. Also, you're going to be displaying a poster that says it's the law, because that is just one of those minor things that's good to have and to cover your butt as the employer, to have that displayed for your employees to see. And they also include reporting to OSHA all work-related fatalities. We're probably not going to have many fatalities in a vet clinic, hopefully not. Then let's go on to, you're required to do training with workers in a language and vocabulary that they can understand. So I need to be able to I have the right to watch training videos and to know how to properly use chemicals and different OSHA regulated things in my workplace as well. And then you are also responsible for posting OSHA citations near the site of the violation. All right, let's move on to, they must provide fall protection for employees. That does not relate to us as much. Let's see, ensure safety of the workers entering confined spaces. That's something that we need to be careful with as well. want to make sure that your exam rooms are spacious and that they're not filled with boxes and everything, so that they can have a proper working uh, mobility. Um, Put on guards on dangerous equipment. That's not as much for our, that's more for like big machinery, but that also goes with, working in a vet clinic, we have needles. Ensuring that you have proper disposal of those needles. That's something that would be an OSHA standard. You need to make sure that you have them being disposed of in the proper way so that you don't have employees getting stuck and then you have to go to the hospital and get blood work done, and it's easier to follow these regulations than it is to send your employees off to get health checks because you're not following the procedures. All right, let's move on, and that is the end of our presentation. So basically what it comes down to is that as an employer, you need to provide a safe working place. And while we don't have very many health risks in working in a vet hospital, but it's still important to follow the OSHA regulations that are set forth. And it's important to provide a safe working environment for your employees so that they are better able to do their jobs.